Well, tonight's topic, philosophy, what's it good for? Perhaps another way of putting it, what's the use of philosophy? Perhaps before we get to delving in that question, I'd like to ask, what is philosophy? Well, let's just step aside for a second and ask the question, what does it mean to do mathematics? Get away from philosophy for a minute. Let's go to mathematics or physics or something like that. What does it mean to do mathematics? What does it mean to do physics? As soon as you ask questions like that, you realise you're not actually doing mathematics. You're not actually doing physics in asking those questions. You're asking preliminary questions, but you're not actually doing the mathematics. You're not actually doing the physics. Asking about those modes of inquiry, those disciplines of human thought, asking what is involved in them is not the same as actually doing them. The case is somewhat different with philosophy. In asking the question, what does it mean to do philosophy? You're in fact doing philosophy. It's a philosophical question and involves you in the very heart and soul of what it means to do philosophy. It's a question that in some way draws us to profound matters of human meaning, the meaning of our own lives, the meaning of our universe, the meaning of all things that we could ever try to comprehend. And this act of involving ourselves in philosophy also draws us beyond the world in which we work and we do and we achieve in sort of measurable utilitarian categories. You know, we involve ourselves from day to day in our work. What are we working for to earn a wage? What are we earning a wage for to live or to have holidays or to raise a family or buy a house, pay off a mortgage? So much of what we do is involved in these kinds of categories of usefulness, productivity, and we find ourselves constantly having to validate and legitimate what we do simply in terms of its contribution to the world or its productivity or its sort of essential value. You know, you meet someone new and they ask you, what do you do? And suddenly, you know, you've got to tell it. You've got to tell what you do. Even if you feel like you don't do anything, you've got to somehow legitimate your very existence by reference to some form of work. This is where we are at in our society. It's a kind of totalitarianisation of work. When you get involved with doing philosophy, you find yourself really unable to legitimate it, to justify it on those kinds of terms, on the terms of what is productive, on the terms of what contributes to a social agenda, in terms of what usefulness we'll get out of it, how we can apply it, and then, you know, do the philosophy, and now we've done it, now we can really work with it and apply it in this way or that way. It's practical, it's useful, it's something productive. If you manage to do that to philosophy, you eviscerate philosophy, and you in fact stop doing philosophy. You see, it's always been the conviction of the great philosophers throughout history that there are some things worth doing and there are some things worth knowing simply for their own sake, not as a means to an end, but as an end in themselves. And that's what philosophy involves us in. It involves us pursuing ultimates that are worthy of pursuit for their own sake, not as means to other ends, so that we can finally put those questions aside and get on with the real business of living. No, philosophy is the real business of living. In a way akin to prayer being the business of living. You know, I can't stand it when you come out of church on Sundays, come out of Mass on Sundays, and people sort of, you know, perhaps it was a really great service for a change, perhaps for some of you, I'm not sure. Really special. The liturgy was great. For once the priest had a good homily to say and said something true and right and encouraging and gospel and Christ-centred. You come away and somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, well, now back to the real world, life in the real world. Well, if this is the real world, and what happens in Mass is an unreal world, then I don't know what we're doing. No, what happens in Mass is the real world. That's where the rubber hits the road. And that's worth doing for its own sake. And you ask yourself, well, what's the usefulness of that? What kind of end does it serve? And we like to sort of, the church is often put on the back foot. What good is the church in society? And we find ourselves justifying the existence of the church on the basis of its helpfulness to society or the way people's lives are changed and what have you. But ultimately, what's the good and what's the usefulness of saying, we praise you, we bless you, we glorify you, we magnify you? What's the usefulness of Kyrie eleison? What's the usefulness of prayer? These things aren't meant to be useful and productive. These are ends in themselves, worth pursuing for their own sake, to the glory of God. Well, philosophy, in a way, participates in that ultimacy, that total primacy that we find in great human pursuits: divine worship, poetry, music, liberal arts, literature, philosophy as well. That sounds very high, it sounds very great, it sounds very noble, but in fact, philosophy doesn't really start up in the heights. Philosophy starts with human experience. Philosophy is not something that's the special prerogative of a few highly trained dons. Philosophy is the business of being human and asking what everything that we do, everything that we experience, means and is, and what's going on there. Philosophy starts with the immediate world of sense perception. That's where we begin in philosophy, but we don't stop there. Other sciences stop there, seek to penetrate the immediate, the obvious, the surface, and that's as far as they go. Philosophy goes further. Philosophy doesn't just seek the immediate cause to some experienced reality. Philosophy goes beyond that and seeks the ultimate cause to some immediate experienced reality. Philosophy rises from proximate causes, as they're called, nearby causes, to ultimate causes to seek what is their ultimate and true meaning and purpose. The word philosophy is probably the best way to come at what it means. Philosophia, the love of wisdom. For Christians, this is surely our raison d'être, our reason for being, the love and the pursuit of wisdom. For who is wisdom but Jesus Christ, incarnate, present in his church today? We ought all to be philosophers insofar as philosophy is the love and the pursuit of wisdom. But really, this is not simply a religious calling. This is a human calling. Because deep within every human being's heart lies this longing, this desire to know the truth about ourselves, the truth about our world, the truth about our being and existence. Philosophy is the love and the pursuit of wisdom. Well, what is wisdom? Perhaps we need to go there a little bit. Wisdom, said someone once, is the most perfect knowledge of the most important things in the right order of emphasis, accompanied by a total, permanent disposition to act accordingly. I'll read that again. Listen to its parts. Wisdom is the most perfect knowledge, but not just knowledge. Knowledge of what? The most perfect knowledge of the most important things, not just any things. The most perfect knowledge of the most important things in any order? No, in the right order of emphasis. Is that it? Knowledge of the most perfect things in the right order of emphasis? No, but accompanied also by a total and permanent disposition and intention to live accordingly.